So according to a report from the Associated Press, the Supreme Court of the United States has been asked to intervene in a lawsuit seeking to block President Biden's loan forgiveness program. The request comes from a Wisconsin taxpayer group that unsuccessfully brought a lawsuit in the past. The Brown County Taxpayer Association argued that Biden's order unlawfully circumvented Congress's power over spending. They also argued the plan was discriminatory by seeking to give particular help to borrowers of color. The association asked the High Court to put the program on hold and consider the group's appeal. Federal officials have not responded to the filing, according to WLUK-TV. The suit was filed by conservative Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty on behalf of the taxpayer group. It argued that the program was overextension of executive power that improperly sidestepped Congress. The complaint was thrown out by a federal judge in Wisconsin and then rejected by the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals in Chicago. U.S. District Court Judge William C. Griesbach also nixed an emergency motion for an injunction as well. The debt relief plan began accepting applications on Monday. The lower court rejection of the suit was based on lack of standing by taxpayers to sue. Breaking news as of just a couple of maybe like 30 or 40 minutes or so, Justice Amy Coney Barrett denied a request by a Wisconsin taxpayer group to halt the implementation of President Biden's federal student loan forgiveness program. Barrett, who is responsible for emergency applications from Wisconsin, rejected the Brown County Taxpayer Association request to block the program just days after the Biden administration began accepting applications from borrowers to have as much as $20,000 in student debt canceled. It should be noted here that this is probably the only way that this case can have any kind of hearing in the Supreme Court, is to argue that this is a violation of the separation of powers, that the Congress has the ability to tax and spend, and this was a overreach by the president to overspend that is counter to what the Congress intended. Now, with that said, Congress did give the executive branch, with the creation of the Department of Education, the ability to forgive debt, different things, and basically gave it the power of the ability to forgive debt in times of economic crises and other emergency issues, and basically gave the executive branch almost carte blanche ability to do so. I say almost carte blanche because you can argue that it wasn't intended for the executive branch to just basically be like, hey, all that money we gave you, never mind, don't worry about all of it. And I think that is probably why Biden didn't go do the whole kit and caboodle with it, didn't go all the way and forgive all of the debt that people hold. Especially, in light of the fact that, the pandemic just hit and it's getting over with and the economy's coming back. But it's interesting that Amy Coney Barrett, Justice Barrett, did not allow this injunction to go through. This does not mean that the court won't hear the case. It just means that the court isn't going to intervene directly and stop it from happening. Simply because she's one of the most, if not the most, one of the most conservative justices on the bench. And so maybe this is one of the other things that I was thinking about, the reason why I didn't necessarily want Biden to forgive all the debt, which being that in the executive power branch also has the ability to do things with owed taxes. And if you want to forgive all student debt, well, the same kind of arguments could be made to forgive all back taxes, interest on that, etc. And I know that's a thing that a lot of liberals and lefties would not want to have happen. Got a comment in from chat. No Nonsense says, it sounds like the power would be abused by someone like Trump, who gives his kids loans under the cover of some government program and then forgives the debt. Yeah, that's probably true as well. That's another good reason why to be a little wary of these actions. Now, again, I don't think the student debt should exist at all. And by that, I mean the federal government, state governments in general, should just be paying the cost of college operations expenses. And then if there's any money that has to come from students, it should be things for like room and board and maybe some of the facility fees and stuff like that. Nobody should be paying for tuition out of pocket. Similarly, nobody should be paying for their own medical bills. plastic surgery aside, basically, right? And that's something the federal government used to do, and that's why we have the problem that we have now. For those that may not know, the United States government, between state, local, and federal government, used to cover 90% of a school's operating budget. After Reagan, that was dropped to about 25%. Just after Reagan basically gutted the entire funding the government gives to schools to pay for themselves, to pay for it, rather. And it shifted that burden over to the taxpayers through a loan program, right? And then after a few more years, it got whittled down. And now governments, federal, state, local, pay roughly 10% of a school's operating budget. The rest comes from loans and grants from various organizations, as well as students themselves. And by doing that, the federal government essentially changed who the customer was from the government to the student. And that's why you have a lot of things like $1 million sports facilities and state-of-the-art housing and stuff like that. Because if you're making a student that's 18 years old the primary person that you have to attract to get your money, you got to give them what they want. And they're going to want stupid things like climbing walls, game rooms, all sorts of other stuff. Comedians coming on campus that you don't have to pay for, etc. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed my college experience, experiencing all that stuff, right? But that wasn't a thing that most colleges had until students became the primary customer, primary driver of recouping for cost. So that's why we're in the situation we're in. Government created the situation by no longer being its primary customer. That's what happens when you turn a thing into a commodity and the thing into a market. You get market forces driving what's going to put cost up. Also, we went from roughly 10% of the population attending college of any sort to roughly 33%, or roughly a third of the country attending college of any sort. So not only did you shift the burden from the government to people, direct payers directly, but you also tripled the number of people that attended and thus made market forces make it more expensive. So it's very interesting that's what we got going on here. And it's one of those situations that like I said, I think the government should basically get in the way again and start paying for it directly.